The boots were the ones he had stitched with his own hands on a winter night when his son had been 7. Small, square-toed, with a single red welt across the left heel, a welt his boy had begged for, because his ma's wedding ribbon had been red, and his ma was the kind of woman who noticed such things. And there were those boots, 3 winters later, on the feet of a child who was not his, walking up the road toward his porch in the first light of a long October morning. Caleb Brody stood in his doorway and could not say one single word. The girl could not have weighed more than 60 pounds. Her dress was the same color as dust. Her hair had been cut short and uneven, as if done with a knife by someone who did not care whether she lived or starved. But the boots were clean. Whoever had put them on her feet that morning had taken a cloth to the leather. The red welt gleamed. Caleb knew every welt on those boots. He had set the stitch himself. The awl had slipped once, halfway through the heel, and he had burned the welt back together with a heated nail so the boy would never know. Tommy had worn them to his first drive when he was 6. Tommy had slept in them one whole summer because he said they felt like the shape of his father's hands. Tommy had been buried in a small box up against the rise behind the barn, and his boots had not been in that box because his mother had taken them off his feet the last night and laid them by the stove to dry. And when she had come back from the room where her son had stopped breathing, she had held those boots against her face for an hour. Then Mary was gone too, the following spring. The boots had gone with her. And now here was a girl in those boots, standing 15 feet from his porch, looking at him the way a wild horse looks at a stranger, willing to bolt, but more afraid of what was behind her than what was in front of her. Caleb took one step down off the porch. The boards creaked under his weight. The girl did not run. He took another step. She did not run. Before we ride any further into this story, settle in wherever you are tonight. If you are listening from a kitchen table or a porch swing or a hospital chair beside someone you love, leave us a note in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. We want to know who is with us. Now back to the road. Caleb walked to the gate. He unlatched it. He walked back to the porch and sat down in the chair where he sat every morning and watched the valley. He did not wave the girl in. He did not call to her. He simply sat. After a long time, long enough that a meadowlark lit twice on the fence post and flew off, the girl unclenched her fists. She walked through the open gate. She sat down on the bottom step of his porch. She set her small bundle beside her. She did not speak. She could not have spoken if she had tried. Caleb could tell. The girl's mouth worked the way a person's mouth works when the words have been locked behind the teeth for years. He brought her a cup of water. She drank it. He brought her a heel of bread and a cold slice of the rabbit his traps had taken the night before. She ate it. When she was done, she folded her hands in her lap and looked out at the valley with him. Neither of them said a word. That was how the girl came to the Brody place in the autumn of 1884. By nightfall, Caleb had saddled the bay mare and ridden out to fetch what his brother Zeke would lend him. His brother was a man named Ezekiel Brody, who had buried a wife of his own and would have given half of what he had left to be the kind of man who could take in a child. He had not been able to. He had 3 of his own. He had 40 acres. He had pride. Zeke stood in his doorway when Caleb pulled up the wagon. He did not invite his brother inside. "What is it, Caleb?" "A girl." "Where from?" "Up the road." "Whose girl?" "Nobody's now." Zeke was quiet for a long time. He removed his hat and looked into it as if it contained something. "You're a fool," he said. "You can't raise a girl by yourself. You won't talk to her. She won't talk to you. The whole valley will talk about it. There's an orphanage in Helena. Father Grady takes good ones. This one isn't going." "Caleb." "Zeke." "You couldn't even save Tommy." The word hit Caleb like a stone. He did not flinch. He had spent 3 winters learning not to flinch at that name. "I don't need to save her," Caleb said. "I need to feed her." Zeke shook his head. He did not invite Caleb in. He went back into his house. He came out again with a sack of flour, a tin of salt pork, a folded quilt his dead wife had made, and $3 silver he had been saving toward a new wagon wheel. "Take the flour," he said. "Take the pork. Take the blanket." He paused. "Take the dollars, Caleb. Lord knows I don't want them back." Caleb put them in the wagon. He did not say thank you. He had not said thank you to anyone in 3 winters. He had not needed to. The ride home took 2 hours. The girl slept in the wagon under the quilt. When Caleb lifted her down at his own porch, she stirred only enough to take hold of the edge of his coat. He let her. Her name was Jessie. She had a piece of folded paper in her bundle, brittle with sweat, with the name Calloway written across it in a hand that had been in a hurry. She had been found at the side of the road 2 nights before by a sheepherder named Coates, who had brought her as far as Miller's Crossing and left her at the livery in lieu of a debt. The liveryman had pointed her up the road, said there was an old Brody place up there, said the man who lived there didn't talk, but kept a clean kitchen, said a body could do worse. Caleb had not asked for any of this. He had spent 3 winters in the silence of his own house healing fences and shoeing horses and reading the mountains for weather. He had not wanted anything but work and the quiet to mourn in. Now there was a girl in his kitchen eating bread with both hands, looking at him with eyes that had been somewhere terrible and had come back with the knowledge of it still in them. He set a bowl of soup in front of her. She was too thin. She watched the soup the way she had watched the bread, like a person who had learned to eat quickly in case there was only this much and no more. He stood across the table from her, and he did not sit down. He figured a man could lose a boy at 7 and still hear his voice across a long kitchen. He figured that was what grief did to a man. It taught him to listen. The girl lifted her head. She looked at the place where Caleb's throat worked over his silence. She did not try to fill it. She went back to her soup. That night Caleb put her in Tommy's bed. He did not change the sheets. He did not air the quilt. He did not explain whose bed it had been. He set a candle on the bureau, and he shut the door, and he sat outside in the dark on the porch where he could hear her if she cried. She did not cry. He did not either. He only set his hand on the porch rail and felt the wood give back the warmth of his own grip. In the days that followed, Caleb gave Jessie a corner of the kitchen and a corner of the barn. He did not crowd her. He did not question her. He worked as he had always worked, mending the trough, shoeing the bay, splitting what wood the coming winter would need. And Jessie followed him from chore to chore at a distance of 3 paces, helping where her small hands could help and standing still where they could not. He learned her language without asking her to teach it. A tug on his sleeve meant help was wanted. A tug on his coat meant she was hungry. She knew how to feed a horse by reaching into the grain barrel and pouring the proper measure into her palm. She knew how to rub a horse's nose to settle a colt she had not been told was afraid. She knew how to look away at the right moment, so the animal could gather its courage without being watched. She had been somewhere that had taught her horses. What would you have done in her place? Would you have trusted a stranger whose silence could cut a room in 2? Tell us in the comments. The hardest part of any story is the moment when 2 strangers decide what they are to each other. Caleb decided it by mending a fence instead of asking a question. The valley decided for itself that he was wrong. Word went from kitchen to kitchen in Miller's Crossing in a single week. Brody had taken in a stray. Brody was feeding a girl he had no business feeding. Brody had gone queer in his grief and ought to be left alone with his madness. Sheriff Tate drove up the road one afternoon and read Caleb the county statute about the guardianship of foundlings. Caleb walked the sheriff back down to his buckboard without a word. The sheriff sat down in his seat and told Caleb, before he turned the team, that if the girl was not signed over to the orphanage before the first snow, he would have to come back with the district magistrate, and that would go worse for everyone. Caleb nodded. The sheriff left. That same evening Zeke arrived on horseback. He had a paper folded into his coat pocket. He had a doctor in town willing to sign a deposition that Caleb could not care for a child. He had a clerk of the court willing to file it by morning. "Brother," Zeke said, standing at the bottom of the porch steps, "don't make me do this." Caleb set his hand on Jessie's shoulder. She did not flinch at his touch. He had noticed that. She did not flinch at his touch, and she did not flinch at the sight of a loaded rifle. Some part of her life had burned the flinching out of her. "Zeke," Caleb said. "Caleb, go home to your children. You aren't hearing me." "I am." Caleb looked at his brother in the way a man looks at another man when he has decided something that will cost him. "I'm hearing you, and I'm asking you to go home." Zeke took the folded paper back out of his pocket. He looked at it for a long time. He put it back in. He turned his horse around without another word. Caleb watched him go. He watched the dust of his brother's horse settle on the road. Then he sat down on the steps beside Jessie, and he set his hand on the porch rail, and he felt the wood give back nothing at all. Harlan Voss had been listening to the gossip for weeks. Voss owned the livery, the feed store, and most of the water rights south of the Bridger line. He did not yet own the Brody place. He wanted it. Caleb's meadow lay across the natural outflow of the new dam Voss was building, and the meadow was the only unfenced grass between Voss's southern range and the northern ridge. If Voss could not buy the meadow, He meant to force the sale of it. A man unfit to keep a child was unfit to keep land. Voss did not ride up the Brody road himself. He sent his foreman, a man named Briggs, with 2 of his ranch hands. Briggs was a quiet little man who blinked too often and who kept a steel knife in his boot for reasons he did not explain. The ranch hands were younger: Bigsby, who never spoke, and Cooper, who spoke too much, in a voice made for empty rooms. They came in the late afternoon, when the light lay flat across the meadow. Caleb was at the far post of his north pasture, mending a length of wire Jessie had tripped the day before. He saw them come over the rise when they were still 100 yards off, 3 men on 3 horses, and he understood that the season of his peace had ended. He set down his pliers. He walked back to the porch. Jessie was sitting in her usual place on the bottom step. He did not tell her to go inside. He knew that any order he gave her now would teach her the wrong thing about the world she would have to live in. He simply stood at her shoulder and waited. Briggs dismounted first. He walked up to the porch as a man walks into a place he has been told he already owns. He did not remove his hat. "Mr. Brody," Briggs said, "Mr. Voss is of the opinion that you and this child cannot continue on this property in its current condition. He has asked me to convey his offer to purchase the place, buildings, water rights, livestock, the lot, for the sum of $300. Caleb did not respond. "300 is fair, sir. The timber is mostly gone off the north side. The barn needs new posts. The well is brackish at the bottom of the year." Caleb looked past Briggs at the meadow behind him. He looked at the marker on the rise behind the barn where Tommy's small box lay under the snow cap of a flat stone. "500, Briggs said, softer now. Mr. Voss would go to 500. He would set a sum aside for the child. "He would not," Caleb said. Briggs blinked fast. He was not expecting Caleb to speak. "He would not," Caleb said again. "He would set her on the stage to Helena with a ticket in her pocket and a name on her back that isn't hers, and he would not lose a minute's sleep about what became of her after. He would plow this meadow by the first week of June, and he would put cows where the boy is buried, and he would not lose a minute's sleep about that either." Bigsby's hand went to his belt. Cooper took a half step back. Briggs did not move at all. He understood what had just happened. He had come to read this man the terms of his surrender, and he had instead met a man who knew the size of his own grief well enough to do arithmetic against it. "We'll be back," Briggs said. "You will be," Caleb said. They rode off down the road. The dust of their horses rose up and hid the marker on the rise. Jessie stood up from the step. She walked past Caleb into the kitchen. She came back out with the paper her dead mother had written her name on. She held it out to Caleb. He looked at it. On the back, in a hand different from the name, were 2 words. Caleb, saved. He did not know what they meant. He looked at Jessie. She looked at him. She opened her mouth and made the shape of a word, a single word, and no sound came out. He figured out what the word was. He figured it out the way a man figures out the weather before the weather arrives, by what the air is already doing around him. "You're staying," he said. She closed her mouth. She looked out at the valley. She did not close her eyes. She had learned not to trust things behind her own lids. While Briggs was riding back to Voss, he passed the home of a man named Coates, the sheepherder who had found Jessie by the road. Coates was in his kitchen mending a sock when Briggs rode past. Coates was watching Briggs. Coates was a man who had walked a girl as far as the livery in Miller's Crossing and had then spent 3 weeks regretting what he had not done. He had been told what became of the girl. He knew how Voss liked to settle accounts. Coates put down his sock. He walked the 4 miles to the courthouse in the dark. He did not say a word to the clerk he startled out of his sleep. He set a packet of papers on the desk, letters he had kept from Jessie, letters her mother had written before she died, letters that contained the only evidence in the territory that Voss had forged 3 of his largest land claims off the signatures of dead men. Coates had been a small man in Voss's office in a past season of his life. He had taken what he had taken when he left. He had kept it wrapped in oilcloth in the bottom of a trunk for 17 years, because a man does not throw a sin away once he has lifted it from the table. He only waits for the right winter to give it back. Coates did not come to the Brody place. He sent a boy on a sorrel pony with a sealed letter and the packet under his arm. The boy reached the Brody fence at first light. Caleb was in the barn shoeing the bay. He took the packet without expression. He carried it into the kitchen. He laid it on the table in front of Jessie. "Read it with me," he said. She could not read. She put her hand on the page. He read it to her. When he had finished, Her hand closed on the paper as if she were holding someone who had died a long time ago and had been waiting to be picked up. He figured a man's whole life could be the sum of two things: what he would not let go of and what he was willing to pick up. He figured he had spent 3 winters learning the first half of that. He figured Jessie had taught him the second half on a single morning. If this story is moving you, you are exactly who we wrote it for. A like and a subscribe tells us to keep going. Now back to the road. He saddled the bay and the gray, and he put Jessie on the gray behind him, and they rode down to Miller's Crossing in the first hour of morning. He did not speak to her on the ride. He did not need to. He had learned the shape of her breathing, which was the shape of her happiness, and he could hear it through the wind over the saddles. He tied the horses at the courthouse rail. He set his hand on her shoulder. He walked her in. District Judge Hoyt was a tired man in a green coat. He took the packet. He read it. He looked up at Caleb with the kind of look a man gives another man when he has just understood what he has been told to understand. "Where did you get this?" Hoyt said. "It came to my kitchen," Caleb said. "This will destroy that man." "I know. It will have to go through a hearing." "I know. It will go worse for him than a quiet sale would have gone for you." "Yes, sir." Hoyt looked at Caleb. Then he looked at the girl. He saw the boots. He did not say what he knew. "Send Briggs in first," Hoyt said. Briggs came in. Briggs saw the packet on the desk. Briggs looked at Caleb. Briggs looked at Hoyt. Briggs sat down in the witness chair and told everything he knew, which was more than Briggs himself had known he knew, in a voice barely above a whisper. It took 3 days to unravel Voss. Voss lost the water rights. Voss lost the Southern Range. Voss lost the feed store. Voss lost the bank account he had built by signing the names of dead men onto the deeds of living ones. Voss lost his name in the territory. By the 3rd evening, 2 of his ranch hands had ridden over to Brody's fence and asked Caleb, plainly, if there was work, and Caleb had pointed them at the broken posts at the bottom of the meadow and walked on. By the 3rd evening, Caleb was sitting on the porch with Jessie at his side. The valley was laid out below them. The light had not yet decided what it was going to do about the day. Jessie was braiding a length of red ribbon into the mane of a yearling she had gentled that summer. Caleb was watching her hands move. "Ma had a ribbon," she said. It was the first sentence she had spoken aloud in 3 years. Caleb did not move. He did not breathe. He had been waiting 3 winters to hear any of God's creatures say a sentence in his kitchen that was not about debt or the weather. "She had a ribbon like this one," Jessie said. "She wore it the night I was born. She had it on the night she died. The lady in the livery took it off her hair and put it in my bundle. It was the only thing of hers they did not sell for my keep." Caleb nodded. He set his hand on the porch rail. He felt the wood give back to him the warmth of his own grip. He had been waiting more than 3 winters to feel that. "I lost my boy," he said. 3 winters ago. He was 7. His name was Thomas Brody, and I called him Tommy, and he used to wear those boots." He looked at the boots on her small feet. "He would have given you his bed before you even asked." Jessie did not answer. There was nothing to add to that. That autumn Zeke came down the road, and this time he did not come with a folded paper. He came with his 3 children in the wagon, and a side of beef, and a bottle of whiskey he had been saving since the year Mary died, and a willingness to set his pride down for an afternoon at his brother's table. They ate together. The children asked Jessie to show them how she gentled the yearling. Jessie took them down to the barn. Caleb and Zeke sat on the porch a long time and did not speak, except once, when Zeke said, "I ought to have come sooner." "You came when you did," Caleb said. "That's what a man remembers." Zeke nodded. He poured them each a cup of coffee he had brought from his own kitchen. He did not add anything for a long while. Then he said, "Lord, it's good to hear you talk." Caleb did not answer. He looked at the meadow where Tommy's box lay under the flat stone, and he looked at the boots on the porch rail, oiled and whole, and he looked at the girl in the barn teaching his brother's children how to set their hands flat against a horse's nose so the horse could see they would not lie. He figured a man who could not speak for 3 winters had been given back his voice by a girl who had not spoken for the same number. He figured grief did not end. It only made room. In the spring, when the snow had come off the rise behind the barn, Caleb walked Jessie up the hill to the flat stone. He had brought a small bunch of wild roses his wife had planted there the summer Tommy was 5. He laid the roses on the stone. He set his hand on the child's shoulder. "This is Thomas," he said. "He would have wanted you here." Jessie set her palm on the flat stone. She did not cry. She did not speak. She only stood there a long time with her hand on the grave of a boy whose boots she had not earned and whose love she had not asked for and whose life she was going to live the rest of hers to deserve. Epilogue. 21 years later, on an evening in late summer, a woman in her 30s sits on the broad porch of a fine house at the bottom of the Brody meadow. A boy of 9 is learning from her how to braid a red ribbon into the mane of a yearling he has gentled himself. The sun has dropped behind the bridger line, and the air has gone cool, and there is the smell of bread in the kitchen and coffee on the stove. An older man sits in a chair at the far end of the porch, his hat over his eyes, his hands folded in his lap. He is not sleeping. He is just listening. He has spent his whole life learning what he can hear when he stops trying to speak. A pair of small boots, square-toed, with a single red welt across the left heel, sit on the porch rail beside him, oiled and whole, where the afternoon's light is just beginning to let them go. Next, we'll tell the story of a deaf woman who was sent to work a remote ranch because her family was ashamed of her, and the blind rancher who saw her worth from the moment she arrived. Until then, ride gentle, friends.